Does gear matter? This is a question that has haunted the entire photo video community here on YouTube, in the forums, on Reddit, since time in memoriam. Since I think photographers started talking to each other, this has been a question that has been on our minds. And I have actually been working on a video, honestly kind of turning into a video series about this question. And for the first installment in that, I actually think that I want to say that it's the wrong question to ask. But for today, I want to just jump into what I think the right question is. What about my equipment actually makes my output better or worse? And I think that intuitively, many of us are asking that question every time we load up that review of that new camera that we're super excited about. So what I want to do today is I just want to maybe add a little bit more structure to that question for all of us as we pore over MTF charts and consider whether 8K is really something that we need for our workflow. I want to give us kind of a set of specifications that we each as individuals have decided are the specs that really matter when it comes to our own personal output. And the way that I've decided to frame that is with a few questions that I think it's incredibly valuable for all of us to ask ourselves about our equipment, but really more about the work that we do, so that we can find equipment that will work with us to our end goal, and not gear we have to work with or around to our end goal. So let's go on ahead and try to figure out for all of us, what are the 5 specs that really matter to us? So the very first question that I think we all need to ask is establish what is the spec that makes or breaks our photos most commonly. Now, in reality, a lot of different things can ruin an image. Maybe the camera doesn't have good enough high ISO performance for the environment you were using it in. Maybe the camera didn't have enough resolution to blow up the image. Maybe you didn't have a long enough zoom lens for the composition that you really wanted. There's a lot of different things that can ruin an image. So in this particular scenario, what we're trying to figure out is what is the thing that ruins our images the most, or in the least recoverable sense. The second question that I want to take a look at is budget. Now, budget is incredibly important to understand how much money you can or cannot spend on your system, or that particular item within your system is essential. You have to know what you're working with before you can begin the process of working around the problems that you may discover or the features that you feel like you need. It kind of goes without saying, but I do think it is important. It's better to focus your research within your budgetary constraints. In other words, if you can't afford a red Raptor like everyone else on the planet, it doesn't really make sense to watch a lot of videos on them. I'm not necessarily saying you shouldn't be educated about what the high-end stuff is, but it's important to understand that this is something that you aren't ready to purchase yet. So it's better to focus on the things you can afford. If your budget is $2,000 for a camera, doing research on a camera that's $4,000 is kind of pointless. Now, I'm not saying that you should never do it, that watching these videos is a wrong thing to do or truly wasteful. It just isn't helping you figure out the right equipment for you. So question 3 is, where do I normally create? Now, the reason why I say where as opposed to what is because the what is completely dependent on the environment that you're in. And this is one of the most neglected topics within all of the photo, video, educational community, is a discussion about what you're actually doing and where you're actually doing it. A great example of this is you can immediately chop out tons of potential options just by saying the fact that I shoot a lot of low light, meaning that having really fast lenses and a camera that shoots at really high ISOs extremely well is very important. And maybe a camera that has good low light autofocus is also important, because I find myself in really dim environments very, very frequently. Whereas if you're somebody else who never really has to worry about this, being concerned about the high ISO performance when you can always shoot at the native ISO of your camera, maybe that's 100, maybe it's 64 because you're a landscape photographer or a product photographer or a studio photographer who's just going to throw more light on the subject so that they can shoot at the base ISO of whatever camera it is, then it doesn't matter. This is why where you're going to shoot, the amount of control you have, becomes so important. The more control you have, the less autofocus really matters. And manual focus might actually become an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage in a lot of situations. So just understanding the environment you're actually going to be capturing in is so important when you think about the camera features that you may actually need. So now question 4 is a little more fun. It's, what is the most extreme project you have planned in the next 6 months? The reason why I want to add this big part about it being within a time constraint is because I think it can be very easy to get hypothetical and get completely lost in the hypotheticals, where you own lenses you never use, not because you want that lens, but because you think you should have it. It's an obligation. I have to have a 70-200 2.8 in addition to my 85 f1.2, not because I want to use the 70-200 more, but because every wedding photographer needs a 70-200 f2.8 or something along those lines. When you understand that your equipment is enough, it can allow you to invest money in certain aspects of your system more recklessly, right? That $3,000 70-200 f2.8 could buy you a trip somewhere. It could buy you a full camera upgrade. It could purchase you 1, maybe even 2 additional fast primes at focal lengths that you might actually use, because you're not going to use a 70-200 over your 85, but you might use a 24mm over your 85. So the 5th question I think we should all ask ourselves to figure out what equipment we do and don't need to buy or want to buy is, and I've been trying to figure out the best way to describe this specific concept, and I think the best way to think about it is, what's your secret sauce? What's your secret ingredients in your work? Quite literally, what's your style? I hate it when people look at photo and video as this mechanical process of just creating images. I think that is tragic. You have to remember that what you're doing is an artistic exercise. Your cameras and lenses are not hammers and nails, they're paint and paintbrushes. They are inform, educate, entertain, tell incredible stories, capture incredible moments. That's what these tools are. And when we forget this and think about everything as sharp as it can be, as perfectly exposed as it can be in that kind of context, I just think that it can really take the fun out of what you're doing, whether it literally is a hobby of yours, or if, like us, it's a combination of a hobby and a passion and also straight up work sometimes. And as you move through that process of answering these other questions, I want you to always keep in mind what you're passionate about. Another great example of this, and I'm going to feed back into the wedding photo video realm as an example of this, is that 85 f1.2 versus that 70-200 f2.8. Both of these lenses have a different creative look. You can absolutely argue that if you walk into a wedding or any situation with either of those lenses, you can create something beautiful to look at. However, what you are wanting to focus on as a photographer and videographer, what your style of work is going to change which lens you actually want. Maybe it's really important to you to capture candid moments and being able to frame them the way you want them to be, being able to see a moment happening across the room and zoom in and get it is more important than having the absolute best low light performance, the absolute most buttery bokeh. But maybe your style is a little bit more commercial, a little bit more fashion. You want to have such a dreamy look to your images, and you want to take the time to ask the bride or the groom or whoever it may be to redo that moment, or you want to walk to literally zoom with your feet. Maybe you compensate for that by having a really high megapixel camera along with that fast lens so you can crop in post to get the composition you want. There's so many different styles and ways of give and take, and the truth is, one way isn't really better than the other. If there's just a way you want to do things. So when you remember your secret sauce, it's going to make things fall into place really, really quickly as far as what lenses and what cameras you should actually buy. This is quite literally the moment where I'm going to tell you, you kind of have to trust your gut sometimes. You can't watch enough videos, you can't do enough testing to really answer the question of what you want, because so many different options can achieve what you need. In that case, you've got to look at your secret sauce. What I hope you've done is written down, or at least started the process of piecing together what your top 5 are. And if you have, please let me know in the description down below what specs you think are the most important for your work. And I will see you on the next adventure.